Now, this week we expect to see measures to introduce tougher sentences on those who take part in hare coursing becoming law. Richard Fuller, the MP for North East Bedfordshire, launched the campaign for this, and it was Richard who introduced that private member's bill as an individual member of Parliament on hare coursing, and he's with us now in the studio. You will forgive me, Richard. Welcome to the show, first of all, I should say.
Thank you.
You will forgive me for just asking a question about your party's woes at the moment.
I thought you might. I think even my constituents would say, why is our MP talking about hares rather than what's been going on at number 10?
Are you on board with the project to Operation Big Dog, the mission to save Boris Johnson?
Well, I don't like that term at all. And in fact, to me, it has one of the problems. My constituents, they have a level of anger and disgust. But one of the issues for them is about the behaviour at number 10. And titles like that, I think, rather irritate further. But generally, yes, I am supportive of the Prime Minister. We'll have to see on the issues that Ms Gray is looking at what they come out with. But in general, the Prime Minister has been leading this country strongly and delivering for the British public.
And there's lots of ideas being mooted about how they might get voters as well as Conservative MPs back on side, tackling the migrant crisis, ending the booze culture in number 10. Do you have any advice of what you would like to see or what your constituents might like to see in the fight back?
No, I've got plenty of advice about changes that I'd like to see. First of all, just as with the issue before Christmas about Owen Paterson, where there was an attempt to disrupt the process, I think it's important that we respect the processes of our civil service, and particularly Ms Gray. And I think it's important that members of Parliament, when her report comes out, are strongly supportive of her, whatever her findings are. I think it's important the Prime Minister accepts her recommendations in full. He has to slay this view that there's one rule for us and another for them. And I expect him to lead very clearly on that. And I do anticipate and hope that he will change the culture completely and the personnel that lead at number 10. I've always believed in the view of living in a glass house. And all of us will have made mistakes during the period of following all those very, very intrusive rules. But it's clear that there's a seriousness lacking at number 10, and that's what I want to see change.
Thank you for explaining that. Now, on your measures, very successful campaigning measures.
A little bit too successful, actually.
To get tough. On hare coursing, just explain what hare coursing is. It's illegal. It's a blood sport, isn't it?
It is, and it essentially means people usually trespassing on land, bringing dogs, greyhounds and other sight hounds, so that they can set the dogs off to chase after hares and kill hares, and to do so making money. And so there's issues of trespass, animal cruelty, crime, and gambling, which this bill seeks to try and improve the powers the police have to try and stamp this out. And in my constituency of North East Bedfordshire, one of the reasons why I put the bill forward was a lot of those constituents are quite isolated. When these events occur, they've got no one to turn to but themselves, because by the time the police get there, often the people will have gone who are doing that hare coursing, and they're just left with the damage and the cruelty to animals on their land.
But if it's illegal, is it that the law needs to be tightened up?
It is. I mean, what I've heard consistently through this, and I've been advised on this by my own Chief Constable, Gary Forsyth, and there's a Chief Inspector in Lincolnshire, I think Chief Inspector Vickers, who's been leading Operation Galileo, is that there's a widespread feeling that the police lack some of the powers in the law to be able to bring prosecutions, and then when prosecutions are brought, it's a slap on the wrist, and effectively those people who can make tens of thousands of pounds, even more in gambling, can just go back and do it all again the next day.
Really? I had no idea about this. I'm really pleased about your measures, because it's enabled me to learn about this. So people, who does this?
So, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you live in a town or a city, you probably don't know about, you know about drug dealing on your street corner, and you're worried about drug dealing, your kids outside. But in rural areas, a lot of what people are worried about is they go out in the evening, they can see tens, potentially even hundreds of people on their fields, and then they say, look, stop doing this on our land, and then they suffer intimidation. And it's that isolation in the rural areas that this legislation is trying to say, we're there for you, and the police want those extra powers. For example, there's no, if the police can't go to rural areas in 1 minute, they can't be there in a minute. So it takes time to get there. By which time, of course, people have moved on. But now, with the legislation that I was proposing, and now which the government is already accepting, there'll be a proposal going equipped for hare coursing. So if you find that there are dogs, if you find there's equipment for gambling and other aspects of it, then the police can bring a successful prosecution.
Do many people go to prison, given it is illegal? No.
There's been some efforts recently, an increase in policing. One of the benefits of the Prime Minister's commitment to increase police numbers in my own area as well as others is that there's more police in the rural areas. But effectively, we need to have these stronger measures on the statute book so that the magistrates' court know that this is a real public priority for rural areas.
And you have been successful at campaigning, as you said, because government are backing it. It's going to become law. But how long does it take? How long is the process between you getting Parliament to vote for something and then the measures that you want enacted are in force?
Well, there's been a lot of effort by members of Parliament, both in this Parliament and in earlier Parliaments. And yes, we've got government support, but even better, in the House of Lords just before Christmas, my local bishop, Bishop Allen of St Albans, he proposed very similar proposals in the House of Lords, and I think the government looked at that and thought, well, let's make something happen. So not only perhaps have we got government support, we may have even higher support for this protection of our wild hares, which I think is a very good thing to do. It's
been a real pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you very much for coming in. I hope we see you on the show more, and congratulations on getting your campaign to become law. Thank you, Richard Fuller, Conservative MP for North East Bedfordshire.